Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spin Reviews, and today Spectrum Pulse and I are going to be talking about the new Train album, Bulletproof Picasso. We're going to talk about our background with them and just our overall thoughts on the album, but I thought I should probably say, first of all, in addition to that, you guys should check out his channel if you haven't already, even though I know he has a lot more subscribers than me. He ended up doing a lot of the talking, which was perfectly fine. He made a lot of great points that I didn't even realize, and I ended up later agreeing with. But at the same time, there is some stuff that I kind of forgot to put in there, so if you want some more of my personal thoughts on it and why I liked certain tracks, maybe he didn't, and stuff like that, I have some points I made that I'll link in the description. So with all that out of the way, here you go. So, what is your sort of history with Train? How did you get into them?
Well, here's the thing. I originally started listening to Train back in the late 90s, early 2000s, back when they started putting out their stuff. Meet Virginia, their very first big single, no real impact with me. I found it rather poorly written. And you started getting a little bit of a sense that Pat Monahan, he was an interesting songwriter without exactly being a good songwriter. Then came Drops to Jupiter, and I'll just say it. Drops to Jupiter is one of my favorite hit songs of 2001, bar none. I think it's a fantastic song. Then came Calling All Angels, and I basically clued off of Train very quickly.
Well, actually, because I'm a significant amount younger than you as far as I know, I actually never heard of Train until Hey Soul Sister came out. Not exactly the best first impression. But, as other singles from that came out in 2009, 2010, If It's Love and stuff like that, I started to I overlooked the eccentricities, shall we say, of the earlier then. I went back and listened to, Drops to Jupiter and My Private Nation. I do really consider Drops to Jupiter, it's not consistently great all the way through, but it's still a solid enough pop rock album. Then came My Private Nation. I liked it a lot more then than I do now, because now, re-listening to it, you can really tell they wanted to capitalize on, the ballad success of Tell Me, but without having nearly the same amount of impact.
Well, a lot of it came from that particular time period, and in pop rock too. They were stepping into a time period that was heading a lot softer, a lot more of what some enterprising critics called Dawson's Creek rock, which is basically a lot of music that was meant to set across long meditative montages of James Van Der Beek looking wistfully into the distance and crying about something. So
yeah, basically.
So, yeah, but and that's pretty much around the time when the critics basically said, yeah, I got a little bit better. The general public pretty much forgot they existed. I was included among that.
Yeah, because that 2006 album bombed. I ended up never listening to it or their self-titled album. But yeah, Hey Soul Sister came out, and boy, did it make an impression. What really changed about them is that, to sort of paraphrase Tom the Shadows here, Pat went insane.
I wouldn't say he went insane so much as, here's the thing that I always notice about Train is that when they're at their best, they are at their most grandiose. They try to go big. They try to take their earnest appeal, and they try to amp it up to 11. That's when I tend to find a Train the most likable. But whenever Train tries to be normal, or they try to sound more accessible, I find them utterly intolerable, because as a lyricist, Pat Monahan is not good with being normal. So that's why you get songs like Hey Soul Sister, which is basically one of the whitest songs ever written. He's trying to sound normal. He's trying to sound in that particular vein, and it's intolerable. And the same thing happened when that next album came out. What was its name?
California 37.
Yeah.
And Drive By.
Uh-huh.
The Hefty Bag.
Yes. They were trying to be a little bit weirder, which means I liked it more, but still the aesthetic was very much white bread, accessible, very, very normal. And Train in that mode comes across as obnoxious because it's not a good fit for the weirdness in their lyrics.
Yeah, and of course something that you can't overlook is just that barrage of just bizarre, irrelevant pop culture references. Like, even in the songs that I like in sort of a semi-guilty pleasures kind of way, like, say, Save Me San Francisco, or if it's Love, or even 50 Ways to Say Goodbye to some extent. Even if you are enjoying it, you know, okay, this guy isn't a master of lyrical tact, at least not at this point.
It's hard to, you start thinking that they're screwing with you a little bit, and then, except the thing is, Pat Monahan presents himself as so earnest that, frankly, I honestly don't actually think that he believes what he's selling, and he doesn't clue into the fact that it's really not well written.
Yeah, because California 37 to me, like, even though Save Me San Francisco did have, like, a bunch of those moments, California 37 was probably the peak of that insanity, basically. Like, if you listen to songs like You Can Finally Meet My Mom or Mermaid, if you want a good example, if you haven't heard that album, of everything wrong with Train's lyricism in the last 5 years, just go look that song up.
But now coming to Bulletproof Picasso, where Train frontman Pat Monahan was saying in interviews he was looking to reach out to people. He was looking to become more accessible. One of his most commercial albums to date. They said that going into making this album.
Yeah, I saw like interview quotes here and there about like they want to play Saturday Night Live and be the biggest band in the world, which, I mean, they've had top 5 hits. They're kind of already at that point, even if they've never technically hit those milestones.
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. I think they want to be respected. Because I think eventually some of the cultural zeitgeist has blown through Pat Monahan's echo chamber, and I think he's finally realized that he's not exactly respected critically.
But I listen to a podcast that Pat Monahan does called the Patcast. He does make some good like observations here and there about like pop trends and stuff like that, but you can tell that he doesn't get why some people don't like him. In the song Give It All, he was talking about the line in Give It All where he's talking about in this world being a white man. He's talking about how people might react negatively to it, but you know what? It's real and it's edgy and risky, but he doesn't get that, no, we're not scared of that line. It's just stupid.
And that's not the only stupid lyric in that song. A song that really is so utterly clueless. It's clueless. And he has lyrics about, forget the white man line, he's like, I have a lot, maybe too much. And I'm like, you're clearly somewhat enamored with all the things that you still do have. And it does not appear flattering at all. It makes you look insincere.
Yeah, this whole song just basically, and I'm going to use this term for the second collab review in a row and realize, but this whole song is basically one big humble brag. I mean, not to mention that it has the 4 chords of pop, which always kind of gets to me.
So let's get to the album as a whole. What did you think of the album?
The interesting thing about this is that I kind of went into this album not necessarily wanting to hate it, but more that I was expecting more the same as there was on California 37, despite what he was saying in interviews and stuff. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't nearly as much of a mess as I was expecting. Like, sure, there are questionable parts here and there, like we just discussed, but in general, I'd probably call this their most consistently okay since Drops of Jupiter, really.
For the most part, I kind of agree with you, because reasonably consistent in terms of his intentions behind this album. That being said, this record is broken, like on a fundamental level. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh dear God, I know exactly what you're doing and it's not working at all. I'm just curious whether or not this is coming from you. Did you get a massive Springsteen feel from this album?
Maybe on a couple tracks. Like, which ones would you single out in particular?
Bulletproof Picasso immediately jumps out at me. Angel and Blue Jeans, just a memory. These particular tracks, they try to strike me with this huge Americana-inspired grit that they're trying to bring to the table. They're trying to bring this grand, almost operatic swell behind him. And they're writing stories about guys in fast cars whistling through fields of grain, being bad guys on the run. If only the good die young, we'll outlive everyone.
Yeah, and plus there's a whole song here where he talks about Cadillacs.
Exactly, and it's a song where he's basically bitching about how he doesn't want to see his girl hook up with anybody. He'd rather just play on his phone and masturbate in front of his computer. When you have this, like, Cadillac is the one that immediately struck out to me because he has these screams throughout the track. Hey, baby! And it's all distorted, and I'm thinking, like, this sounds like something that Fall Out Boy did on Save Rock and Roll, plus with the drum machines. plus with the way that he's going for this cacophonous, heavy production that is so synthetic. Pat Monahan clearly thinks that he's trying to portray this swaggering outlaw badass. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, no, you can't pull this off. And the thing is, he's not getting it. And it's painful how much he's trying. And the funny thing is that there are points he gets close. There are points where I think he really does get close. Like, take the song Angel in Blue Jeans, which feels like it's straight out of a spaghetti western, a Sergio Leone movie. And I'm sitting here, I'm laughing my ass off. And yet I can't really deny that I am enjoying the hell out of the instrumentation.
That song first came out as the lead single, and I feel like there's some reason I should be disliking it. I can't quite figure out why, and at the end of the day, it's one of my top 5 tracks on the album.
It is probably my favorite track on the album, along with I'm Drinking Tonight. They go for that Western-inspired feel, that like outlaw feel, and it kind of gets close to pulling it off. Lyrically, they're both terrible. Like, I mean, take Angel in Blue Jeans. He's talking about, this is ultimately a song he wrote about his wife, according to one of his interviews, who evaded him all of this time and who shot him down, and then in the end he somehow ends up with her. And they somehow have this thing together. And here's the thing. You start reading into the lyrics and like, this woman does not know his name, and he does not know her name at the very beginning of the track, and yet he's head over heels in love with her. He's trying to play this song as some grand statement, and the instrumentation with this grand, almost operatic with the spaghetti western imagery, yet it's really just a hookup track disguised as a humble brag.
Yeah, that's really what I'm getting from it, because I feel like there's a fine line between like this almost like forbidden, like vague love before it builds over time, and just kind of being stupid. It just seems a little overly impulsive to be able to, I guess, relate to.
Well, the thing is that he's trying so hard to come across as relatable. He tries like Son of a Prison Guard, where he tries to describe his family situation. He tries to play up his blue-collar roots. Another way he's trying to come across as Springsteen. Number one, the instrumentation and production is way too synthetic. With the percussion, with moving the percussion as heavy and as to the front of the mix trying to be all sweeping and expansive, and yet it comes across as so stiff and so lacking in proper melody. Say what you will about Springsteen, even in the 80s, but he had a loose ruggedness. You can believe what he was selling. With Train, I can never buy it, even though I feel like it's coming from a real place. It's coming from an earnest place.
Even on those tracks that I really like I'm Drinking Tonight, or Angel in Blue Jeans, or The Bridge, like, they do incorporate these, like, country or southern rock, or, like, even funkish on the bridge kind of influences, but it does feel like it's sort of through this pop sheen filter, in a way.
Yeah, and none of it feels authentic, and that's coming back to The Bridge, honestly. It feels like an 80s-inspired disco tune. And the thing that annoyed me about The Bridge was lyrics. Not only is the lyricism completely played out and hackneyed, but I also found, like, in terms of the metaphors that he was trying to craft in terms of this bridge, you start wondering whether or not he's really invested in this relationship as it is. Like, he keeps on seeing that he, like, throughout the first verse and in the pre-chorus, he's saying it's starting to feel like he's almost going to dump her, and then yet he's still like, but you have to dive into the fire anyway. I'm like, why?
Yeah, again, it's like he's trying to play himself as, like, some kind of scorned victim in a way, but he just kind of comes off heady, kind of dickish, I guess. Like, he's looking for any reason to just end this relationship off.
And he wants to look the best possible way as doing it. He's never willing to frame himself as being the party that is actually wronging somebody. And that's the thing that comes up, is you have songs like Just a Memory, right? It's a song that almost plays out like Paradise by the Dashboard Light by Meatloaf. It's a song that plays out that scale of that romance, someone who gets caught up in those flighty, youthful affection, and then goes forward, and then real problems start cropping up and things start falling apart. And he said, I have to hold on to you so you're not just a memory. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, this particular relationship, it was built on hollow reasons, like hollow, shallow teenage lust. And frankly, there's not a good reason for this to stay together outside of some nebbish fantasy that comes straight from the Springsteen playbook.
And doesn't help that with songs like I Will Remember. There are some real cliche lines in there, like, have you ever done drugs? It's like love. Have you ever done love? It's like drugs.
Oh my god, that line hurt me. That, besides the drum machine on that track, which was awful. Like, it was so obvious in terms of the drum machines and how that was syncopated. But the lines are so hackneyed. And then the one track that really broke me in terms of, I'm like, nope, I'm done, was on Baby Happy Birthday.
That's the next one I was going to talk about. I get the sentiment it's going for, where you're sort of trying to make amends in a relationship for being neglectful. Okay, fair enough, but it just gets so awkwardly specific with, like, forgetting your birthday and just basing this whole dramatic instrumentation and theme around it.
It comes across as way too defensive. Honestly, that's the thing that bugs me, is that the family obviously doesn't like him. The sister wants to knee him. And then the one line that got to me is, think what it's like to be me before you leave me. Okay, you know what? Like, you're trying to make up to your girlfriend because you forgot her birthday, and you're gonna throw that line in. To quote Dan Savage, dump the motherfucker already.
Are there any songs here that you were a fan of lyrically?
I liked I'm Drinking Tonight, honestly. It's simple enough in concept. It's bare bones. It's nothing special in terms lyrically, but at the same time, it's something that I didn't find all that offensive. The closing track, what was it?
Don't Go Up So Fast.
It was simple. I think it was clumsy, but honestly, lyrically, it didn't offend me, and I thought it was reasonably well done.
It's probably one of the ones that stood out to me lyrically, just because it did kind of go for this moral kind of theme on it. I'm kind of curious what your take on that was.
I understand it, like, because the funny thing is, he's trying to come across as world weary on this album, and he's not good at it. But at that song, when he's trying to speak to somebody who has less experience than him, I can kind of see it working a little bit. At the same time, though, when we look at the album as a larger whole, it's a song that can come across a little condescending, because you see Train exercising so many very adolescent power fantasies. The reason I cannot hate this album is because they're presented so earnestly, and you can tell he doesn't know enough to realize that he's screwing up. And I can appreciate that.
Frankly, part of what I was saying earlier, I was going within those kind of low expectations lyrically, and it's like, okay, the lyrics here are going to be clumsy, but can you look past them for that? And that's one of the songs where that's definitely the case. Along with I'm Drinking Tonight, it doesn't exactly have a groundbreaking take on the whole drinking to forget about next kind of thing, but it does it reasonably well. I'm curious what you think of the song Wonder What You're Doing for the Rest of Your Life. That ended up being one of my favorites.
I found that song incredibly annoying, like mind-bogglingly annoying, in terms of the constant New York references, like where Big Apple was being played as the devil, and I think part of it was the female vocalist. I was not a fan of her. It was one of those songs that felt incredibly smug and self-satisfied. As I said before, when Train goes for songs that sound a little bit more normal and accessible like that one does, it comes across as grating to me, and that song just grated on my nerves.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those songs where yeah, there are those clumsier lines, but I don't know, I think I was just able to overlook it for how catchy it was, which I couldn't really say about, like, say, Give It All, or I Will Remember, or Baby Happy Birthday.
All three of those are probably my least favorite songs on the album, so yeah, I'm with you there.
You know, in some way, because I feel like there's not really as much to talk about with this album, at least on my end, even though you seem to have some points, just because, you know, those bafflingly awful moments, like, there wasn't a drive-by on this album for me.
You're right, and I think that's ultimately the thing where Train ultimately improved. Like, they had a little bit more focus in and coming through with what they wanted to do, but I ultimately feel the album fails more starkly in that regard, because you can very cleanly discern its intent, and thus you can see exactly where it falls apart. You can see it's way too artificial. You can see Pat Monahan over-singing his ass off, trying to make this sound rough and visceral, and he fails because, well, he's not Springsteen. He's not even Patrick Stump, and his falsetto's terrible. Like, I cannot...
yeah, Give It All. That's one of the reasons why it's maybe my least favorite on this album.
Yeah, I can agree with you there, because his falsetto is so bad. And the thing is, I can't get mad at this album, because it's trying so hard, and its intentions are good, and there are moments where they come close. Like Angel in Blue Jeans, I'm Drinking Tonight. those are songs where I can kind of see the fantasy materializing. But at the other hand, I can listen to this album, or I can go listen to a Meatloaf record. I can go listen to Bat Out of Hell and get the very same sort of fantasy, except way better articulated, with much stronger hooks, and from a far better songwriter.
Not to mention with the good amount more self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly. And because this album is not self-aware.
Yeah, because I feel like that's sort of the main problem that's plagued Train over the last couple albums, is that clearly Pat Monahan doesn't proofread. He doesn't do a second draft. He might even just be improvising in the studio. He's not really mentally in check in the way where he can sit down and see, like, okay, this line's a little clumsy, maybe change it to this, or this line might come across the wrong way, maybe make it a way it's a little more reasonable. Filter to him.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I think he's just got I think he's like Kanye. He's got nobody to say no to him.
I'm not sure if his ego's quite at that level.
I think to some level it is, because you don't write songs like Bulletproof Picasso and with that particular brand of overwrought production if you don't have an ego in some particular regard.
Something I wanted to touch on was the album title. We were going back to like stuff they said in interviews and stuff, and one thing I saw, Picasso, like this great artist, and Bulletproof, like people are constantly taking shots at them, but they're pretty much immune to it. But to me, I feel like they're kind of overstating themselves in that regard, because this band isn't some misunderstood band that gets hate for all the wrong reasons and is constantly misinterpreted, and they're all artistic and experimental and stuff. This is Train.
Yeah, very much so.
Like I said, this is probably the second best Train album I've heard. My expectations were a bit exceeded. Like, I don't think, again, this is definitely a mess of an album, but not really on the same level as, say, California 37. If we're going with scores here, I would probably give it, like, it was a light 7 at first, but, I'm just going to give it, like, a 6.5 on my scale. What would you give it?
Here's the thing. I get what this album is trying to do. I understand it, and there are points I like. The problem is that the points I like are in spite of everything else that is wrong with it, and how fundamentally broken I think this album is. I don't think it works. I think, even despite it has good intentions, I feel that the production is way too sterile, way too processed, not nearly as organic as it should have been. I find the lyrics either hackneyed or poorly sketched out or poorly thought through. Pat Monahan, as a vocalist, has never impressed me. He can sell his material, but here he was coming across as really overwrought, especially when he went to his falsetto range, and I didn't like it. So, for me, I'm thinking a very solid 5 out of 10.
To me, like, on songs like The Bridge or Wonder What You're Doing for the Rest of Your Life, I know you weren't really fans of them, but personally, it's just ones where it's fun and upbeat and catchy enough that the flaws are consistent in this album, but at least then I'm able to overlook them for some reason.
I get that, because you can, once you can immediately see them all, they're easier enough to overlook in favor of the elements that you like and which work, which honestly was pretty much what got me through the more spaghetti western inspired songs, because I can see them. Yeah, I know there's problems lyrically, but god damn it, it sounds like a spaghetti western. I like that. So
part of the reason why, if we're counting the singles on Save Me San Francisco, I prefer, like, If It's Love and Save Me San Francisco over Marry Me any day. So, I guess that's it. You guys probably check out Spectrum Pulse's channel. He has a lot more subs than me, but in case you guys aren't subbed, definitely check him out. If any of you guys are actually fans of, like, country music, he's probably the only channel on YouTube that does cover country on a regular basis, as you probably heard when he was talking about the more spaghetti western inspired stuff.
Yeah. If you guys are coming over from my channel, be sure to check out more of Spin It Reviews stuff. Mark does a lot of interesting reviews, covering a fair amount of stuff. He's collaborated with John over at Album Review TV a couple of times, and they put together some good material. He's starting out, but I want to see more album reviewers develop more of a following. So make sure to check out his stuff. Let us
know what you guys think of this album, and if you're a big fan of Train, be sure to be civil about it if you disagree.
Actually, don't be civil. It's more entertaining that way.
Yeah, I take that back, actually. Bye.